Hey, good morning, everybody. Let's jump right into our devotion. Slideshow here entitled today's Garbage In, Garbage Out. This is out of the message. I brought this point out Sunday that the Lord had given us, um, uncompromised, and talking about Daniel and the three Hebrew children there. Verse scripture I wanted to look at today is in Daniel 1 and 5. It says, "The king appointed to them um, daily provisions of the king's meat and of the wine in which he drank, so nourishing them 3 years. At the end thereof, they might stand before the king." And we talked about how that they were trying to, rename, they were going to re-educate, indoctrinate them, um, everything that they had known previously, and now that they were slaves, the king was trying to change their identity, and also wanted to change their food. Um, and so the point we talked about was the new diet, and said that we was talking about Sunday that these four young men had lived, and for the most part, Levitical law handed down to them as to what they should and should not eat. And the purpose of that was so that they would not defile themselves. Um, I mentioned Sunday that most likely the food was unclean. By Jewish standards, most of the meat probably sacrificed to idols, therefore defiled them uh, as unclean before the Lord. Now we know that today, in the Old Testament law, um, as far as clean and unclean food, not so much in the New Testament church, which we live in today. But one of the things that we do have to be careful of are the things that we allow to come in to defile us in other forms. Not so much in the food in which we eat, but what we allow to enter into our minds, what we allow to settle into our heart, whether it be resentment, bitterness, anger, whatever. Um, and then, as a result of that, especially as Christians and in service for the Lord, when we allow things like that to defile us, you know, we're really deemed unusable by Him. We may continue on and go through the motions, but um, you know, He's not going to. His Spirit's not going to allow us to minister when we ourselves are defiled. And that's the same thing with Daniel here in the Hebrew children. They knew that if they took of the king and became defiled, then God's not going to be with them, and they wouldn't have. Daniel would not have been able to interpret the dreams and things like that. So the part of the service that we talked about, the sermon, was uncompromised. Certain choices Daniel made, knew that in his life, if he compromised on certain standards, he wore their clothes, he lived in the palace, he did the things that he worked hard for the king, but that he drew the line. He drew the line and would not allow certain things into his body, um, so that he wouldn't be defiled. And we got to make sure that we're doing the same thing as well. So it's extremely important that we constantly guard ourselves in the matter of what we take into our lives. And then two verses of scripture here, one by Paul in 1 Corinthians 9:27, and the other one by David here in Psalms 101. But Paul says this, he says, "But I keep under my body and bring it to subjection, lest that at any means, when I have preached to others, I myself should be a castaway." And so again, he's talking about he daily makes the choice. There's things that he's not going to allow to be a part of, that he's not going to be a part of, that would defile him. Because then he says, otherwise, that when he preaches to others, that he should be a castaway himself. And then David said this in Psalms 101:3. "I will set no wicked thing before my eyes. I hate the work of them that turn aside. It shall not cleave to me." So both of these were making a choice. One thing that I was going to talk about Sunday that for time purposes, Lord just didn't really feel Lord was leading us into it, but I talked about, we're going to talk about the Jed Clampett syndrome. And I think most of us Odies, we are very familiar with Jed Clampett there off of the Beverly Hillbillies, but we know the story of him. He was the I think it was from the hills of Tennessee, and he was out shooting, one day hunting, and struck oil, made it big time, millions of dollars, and so everybody encouraged him to move out. By choice, he then moves to California. Um, and in the time there, and you see the whole sitcom there was based on the fact that Jed Clampett and Granny and Ellie Mae and Jethro had all left Tennessee, but they still dressed the same, they looked the same, and they ate the same. They didn't allow California to influence who they were. They kept their old identity. Now, there's two ways to look at that in that syndrome. As a Christian, we need to leave the old man behind. We need to take of the new man, the new coat, the new clothes, that the new garments that Christ puts on us, and eat from the king's table. Okay, so that would be the bad Jed Clampett, but the good Jed Clampett would be to where, as Christians, when we're in new and unfamiliar circumstances, that we don't allow those to defile us, that we do remain true to who it is that Christ has called us to be. So whether it's in our diet, whether it's in what we think, whether what we watch, what we listen to, what we associate with, who we allow to influence us, we need to be very careful that it's not going to be anything or anyone that we're going to allow defile us to be used by God. So I pray that you have a great day. We love you. Look forward to seeing you real soon.